Morning, everyone ready? All good, Terry? Everyone? Well, good morning. I'm Mark Denzler, President and CEO of the Illinois Manufacturers Association. I'm proud to be here today with a coalition representing the business community and organized labor to talk about the negative impact that the governor's energy plan will have on businesses and working families in Illinois. Make no mistake, this is the largest rate hike on Illinois businesses and families in our state's history and will create reliability issues. Joining us today are Jacob Margulies from Continental Envelope, Jeff Dories with Alton Steel, Rick Turvin from the Illinois Pipe Trades Association, Chad Goldschmidt from the Southwestern Illinois Building Trades Council, Jeff Atkinson from the Grain and Feed Association of Illinois, and Rob Carr from the Illinois Retail Merchants Association. Manufacturers employ 556,000 women and men in Illinois factories today and contribute the single largest share of the Illinois economy. This legislation will have a disproportionate impact on our state's manufacturers because they use 1/3 of all energy consumed in the United States. And let me first say that manufacturers are leading the way in finding innovative ways to harness U.S. energy. Pioneering companies are developing new technologies that make energy more affordable, reliable, and cleaner with every passing year. Nuclear power is an important piece of Illinois' competitive energy marketplace, as is renewable energy. And a strong infrastructure to maintain grid reliability is important. In the last decade, our nation's manufacturing sector has reduced emissions by 21% while increasing economic output by 18%. So energy policy can present great opportunities for manufacturers, but also great challenges and obstacles, which is why we're united today in opposition to the clean energy proposal that's been circulated in recent weeks by the governor's administration. While the proposal is being drafted behind closed doors, we have a broad outline of the plan, which again amounts to the largest rate hike on businesses and consumers in Illinois history. And despite repeated requests, the governor's office has failed to provide rate cost estimates, studies on reliability, or the impact on job loss from companies who will be asked to pay significantly higher electric bills. At a minimum, we project the first installment or cost increase to be $700 million per year. Ratepayers will also be asked to shoulder $215 million for new programs under which they've had no input. And even more disturbing is a scheme that's come forward in the last month that will result in a massive cost shift to commercial and industrial ratepayers. The original proposal from the governor's office and the working group created a customer charge of $3.70 per month. Recently, they've shifted that, and they're now looking at $12 per month for commercial and industrial, an average of $1,907.58, which is a 55,000% increase. And again, these are numbers that the governor's office shared with the working group. And that's just the beginning. Because this proposal is being drafted in secret, there's no telling what the final price tag will be. As I've noted earlier, we've asked for economic, reliability, and rate impact studies and the data that's being used to craft this proposal. Those requests have been ignored. This is no way to approach landmark energy legislation that will upend our state's competitive energy marketplace. I'm going to give you a couple quotes from the Commerce Commission. On April 8th, the Illinois Commerce Commission testified in the Senate regarding the CEJA legislation, which is largely part of the governor's bill, noting it will have, quote, substantial impacts on ratepayers, end quote, and it would, quote, significantly change energy markets. They even noted that, quote, the impacts could well be larger than those presented. The ICC testimony also included what I consider to be a shocking statement, quote, it is not clear how Illinois' electricity needs will be fully met in the event of fossil fuel power plants are eliminated. Let that settle in for a moment. Illinois' own energy regulator, led by the governor's appointees, is sounding the warning alarm that they don't know how Illinois' energy needs would be met. Indeed, affordable energy prices and reliable grid have been cited by the governor's office time and time again as why businesses should locate or grow in Illinois. I've heard it repeatedly from the Pritzker administration, but their actions don't seem to meet their words. Now we're on the verge of taking away this economic development incentive. Couldn't come at a worse time for businesses and working families looking to rebuild and rebound from the pandemic. We asked the governor and lawmakers to rethink this proposal and meaningfully engage with consumers, with the business community and residents, business owners, organizations, municipalities that will be saddled with these new costs. Thank you. I'd now like to turn it over to Jacob Margulies with Continental.
Thank you, Mark. I'm Jacob Margulies, president of Continental Envelope, located in Geneva. Continental Envelope is a family-run business. We've been in business since 1936, and we've grown to become one of the largest independent envelope manufacturers in the Midwest. We have about 100 workers who rely on us to feed their families and for jobs. The energy proposal would be detrimental for our company, raising our costs by at least $100,000 per year. That is something that we cannot afford coming out of the pandemic. It would result in increased costs and decrease our ability to be competitive against other envelope companies in neighboring states. Decisions of this magnitude should not be made behind closed doors. We ask lawmakers to please consider the impact this legislation would have not just on our business, but on businesses across Illinois, as well as the families they support. Thank you. I'll turn this over to Jeff Doris.
My name is Jeff Doris, and I'm the CFO for Alton Steel, located in Alton, Illinois, which is just north of St. Louis. Alton Steel was founded in 2003 and converted to 100% employee ownership in 2019. We currently have 265 employees, with 80% of our workforce proudly represented by the United Steelworkers of America. We operate a 200-ton electric arc furnace and a 14-inch rolling mill to produce special bar quality steel bars ranging from 3/4 inch to 4 inches in diameter. Alton Steel is one of the largest recyclers in Illinois, and electric arc furnaces are the lowest carbon process for making steel. Electric arc furnaces, as the name implies, are large consumers of electricity, and our power bill runs into the millions of dollars annually. After payroll and benefits, utilities are our largest expense. A competitively priced and reliable supply of electricity is vital to Alton Steel and all other electric arc steel producers in Illinois. According to our understanding, the legislation in its current form will have the impact of increasing our utility bill by over $500,000 annually, potentially putting us at a competitive disadvantage. The deregulation in the 1990s provided Illinois businesses with some of the most competitive power costs nationally. It is important that any bill contemplated does not take away one of the biggest competitive advantages that Illinois manufacturers have. This is important to protect the well-paying jobs with excellent benefits at Alton Steel, for our local community, and Southern Illinois. Manufacturers need to be involved in the conversations and the process of crafting this important legislation. Thank you. Now for Jeff Atkinson.
Good morning. I'm Jeff Atkinson. I'm the Executive Vice President with the Grain and Feed Association of Illinois. Our association represents over 150 agricultural businesses throughout the state of Illinois. These companies receive, condition, store, and ship the corn, soybeans, wheat, and other commodities produced by Illinois farmers, as well as manufacture food for pets, equine, and livestock. Each of these processes takes electricity to power high horsepower motors to run conveying equipment and feed manufacturing equipment, and large fans to keep the grain in condition. Having a reliable power supply to handle the crop when the farmers harvest in the fall is crucial to maintaining the quality of perishable commodities that we receive. The increased cost for power to agricultural businesses like those run by our members will be passed on in the form of lower prices to farmers for their commodities and higher prices for animal food. We're requesting the governor and lawmakers take a more inclusive approach to crafting legislation of this significance. Thank you. Now on to Rick Turvin.
Thank you, Jeff. Good morning. My name is Rick Turvin, and I am the Legislative and Political Director for the Illinois Pipe Trades Association. We represent nearly 30,000 union plumbers, pipe fitters, and sprinkler fitters across Illinois. Our union members work at and help maintain nearly every single facility that is at risk of closure in the proposed energy legislation. Because of this, the impact on our members and their families will be substantial. We know the energy sector is rapidly changing and understand the need to transition to cleaner power in Illinois. However, our concern is the current proposal is so aggressive and unrealistic in forcing plant closures, it will cause unnecessary pain for many workers, businesses, and communities across the state. We have been told there is a desire to craft an energy bill that prioritizes a just transition for fossil fuel workers. Unfortunately, we think the current proposal falls very short of this goal. We feel there is a better approach that can largely achieve the same end goals, but is more thoughtful and sensitive to the impact on workers. As it is right now, the current proposal picks winners and losers and leaves out many potential ways our state can significantly reduce its carbon footprint without as much economic disruption. We are asking the negotiators of the legislation to more fully acknowledge the effect the bill will have on working families. This is such a massive issue, it's not one we can just wing it and go back later and fix the mistakes. We have to get it right the first time, as the unintended consequences could be devastating. Thank you for your time, and I will now pass on to Chad.
Good morning. My name is Chad Goldschmidt. I'm the Vice President of the Southwestern Illinois Building Trades. We represent approximately 10,000 workers, men and women, that would be negatively impacted by this legislation. It's important to note that the plants targeted for this closure have demonstrated a commitment to working with policymakers to further mitigate CO2 emissions into the future. If plants like Prairie State and CWLP are prematurely shuttered, not only will Illinois need to import power from other states, it would be economically devastating to small communities surrounding rural power plants such as Prairie State that depend on revenue generated by such facilities. These plants supply thousands of jobs for local men and women through extensive maintenance performed on them each year. This would transfer Illinois into a net importer of generated power and a net exporter of jobs. Working families should not be asked to pay more for less reliable power, which would happen under this plan. We urge lawmakers to reject any plan that would prematurely close these plants in 2035. Any plan that puts Illinois on a path to a cleaner energy future must protect consumers, workers, and taxpayers. Thank you. I will now turn it over to Rob Carr.
Thank you. Good morning. Rob Carr. I'm President and CEO of the Illinois Retail Merchants Association. Speakers who came before me, this coalition gathered here this morning, did a great job of explaining their various concerns with the legislation, nearly all of which center around transparency and accountability, or the lack thereof. When Illinois deregulated its markets in 1997, it resulted in billions of dollars of savings to consumers of all kinds. It created a huge competitive advantage for Illinois, which we have retained to this day, and made us a leader. From what we've been able to learn from this proposal that's under consideration, it would undo that progress, putting in place the largest rate hike in history on businesses and consumers. As Mark Densler noted, will cost at least $700 million a year, but will likely go very much higher from there. We've only been able to determine those costs based on what we've been able to learn in various conversations and from what we've been able to model based on those things that we have been told. It could easily double, we've been told by others, to a $1.5 billion or more per year for the next decade. This is a particularly painful prospect for retailers, many of whom are forced to limit or close their operations during the pandemic, and others who experienced shutdowns, particularly in the city of Chicago, but a couple other areas around the state due to civil unrest. Transparency and accountability is what's missing here. I was here in '97 when we debated and moved from a regulated market to a deregulated market. I was here when we did FEJA. If I recall correctly, in both cases, IRMA was the only statewide business association to support both efforts. But in both cases, months and months and months were spent openly trading language, openly sharing cost analysis. That is missing from this debate. Cost analysis that could be independently verified. Did we always reach agreement on those? No, but it came a lot closer to getting to an understanding of how estimates were being reached and what the expectations would be. It worked for dereg, it worked spectacularly. It became a model for the nation, and I would argue it worked for FEJA. Mark Densler read quotes from the ICC. Since those damning quotes, where have they been? We've not heard from them. Why not? We should hear from them. We should have those cost estimates and access to those. And we're not the only ones raising these concerns. Multiple editorial boards around the state have issued opinions in the last couple of weeks on exactly these types of points. But one thing is certain from all of this. Businesses and consumers are on the verge of having to pay hundreds of millions, if not billions, a year for at least the next decade, probably well beyond. And we'd be happy to take any questions now that you might have.
You know, I'm a little surprised.
First, then we'll go
If
here.
you could address, I guess, when ideologies worked into public policy, what are the concerns, what are the problems, what are the challenges there?
And I don't want to be the only one answering questions here, but I think what's very important here is exactly what I just mentioned. That's where you have to take ideologies and goals. I'll even be kinder and call them goals, right? Aspirations. Aspirations are important for all of us, but at some point you have to subject them to scrutiny, both in terms of language and in terms of financial projections. These are people's pocketbooks we're talking about. They're investments they've made, jobs from our labor friends that are at risk. These things need to be understood and clearly vetted, and they're not being so.
Well, it seems to me that whenever there's an energy bill around here, it's a big wet kiss for Exelon. And a lot of the folks up there, it seems to me, are the type that would say, yay, Exelon, as opposed to, yay, working people. You know, where am I wrong?
Well, I think number one, you have working people here with us this morning. Second, I think while we don't necessarily say yay Exelon, we have to keep in mind that whether your ideology is to reach a clean energy economy, you have to have the nukes. We've needed the nukes for reliability. They keep the manufacturers' machines running. They keep our freezers on and functioning. They keep our union friends working, and they keep that functioning. I'd be happy to, if anyone else has another answer.
I'm sure Exelon is one of your constituents.
So manufacturers are concerned, Dave, about cost and reliability, as I mentioned. And certainly nuclear is an important part of the component, and we support nuclear power, just like we support other forms of power, including renewable energy. But if the state moves in a direction, for example, where nuclear facilities are forced to close, not only does it put men and women from labor out of work, but it creates a reliability issue, and then you're going to have a significant cost impact as well. So again, nuclear power is important, but it's one piece of this broader program.
Mark, you
Can
mentioned-
I raise a question here? First of all, we have wind and solar combined don't make up more than 7% of our energy pie. When you say we're not going to use fossil fuels, you're going to deny us 40% of our energy supply. We can't replace 40% with 7%. That's just a given, no matter how you slice and dice, okay? Our friends from labor here typically are funding the Democratic Party. That's no surprise. Would you, on the union side, because I think the governor's just going to say, I don't have to back the business guys, they're the enemy politically. But what about you union people? Would you be willing to come up and say, if this goes through, we will put our donations behind Republican candidates or anyone who is opposed to that in an effort to overturn that legislation? Because you're going to get shafted as much as anyone else.
Well, first, Terry, you can, and I want to take a little bit of umbrage, you can never link contributions to any kind of legislation. So first and foremost, nobody up here would do that. And I'm not sure that's an appropriate question, but I do want to address the RPS standard, because that is an important point. Keep in mind, we created the RPS standard in 2007 for the first time with a goal, I believe, of 20% renewable by the year 2020. Nowhere close to meeting it. So in 2017 under FEJA, they said we're going to increase the goal and we're going to extend the time period. I believe it's 25% by 2025. Under this proposal, they now want to get to 40% by 2030. But your point is accurate in the fact that if you had all the current renewables that are out there and everything that's in the pipeline is built out, we are less than 10% renewable. We've spent billions of dollars since 2007, and we've barely moved the needle. I somewhat equate it to Amtrak spending billions of dollars to make the trains go 5 miles an hour faster. So while renewable is important, there should be a look back at the billions of dollars spent on renewable and why are we still less than 10%? And to your point, if we lose nuclear power and 40%, renewables are not able to replace that, which goes to our argument about reliability and then cost.
Mark, it's difficult for us to vet what you guys are saying because there's no legislation that's been proposed. But you mentioned there's discussions of shifting the burden from residential to business. What does that look like?
So that was a proposal that the governor's office explored with the working group, I believe it was 3 or 4 weeks ago on a Saturday. They provided a sheet to the working group that we were able to get a copy of. And again, originally, the proposal was going to be a customer charge or a wire charge of $3.70 per month. They ultimately decided, or in that group, they proposed shifting it away from residential onto commercial and industrial. And so the numbers that were provided to that group, these are not numbers that we came up with. I was trying to see if I could find them, Greg. They came up with that the commercial on average was going from $3.70 a month to $11.94 a month. And the average industrial was going from $3.70 per month to $1,907.58 per month. And that's average. It's about, I think they put on the sheet about a 0.18 cent per kilowatt hour. So companies can kind of do the math. And if you're a steel producer or a large food processor or heavy equipment, I mean, you use a lot of energy. That adds up very, very quickly.
And you guys called this news conference, they were here, 3 weeks ago? I can't remember how long, but, they didn't advance anything. Then they came back and said, we're gonna take a few weeks off. What are you guys hearing? Are they gonna come back? When are they gonna come back? And why call this conference today?
Well, it's important. I think meetings are continuing to occur. I don't know, I can speak for the IMA, and I think you heard from up here. None of us have been invited into the room to have the conversations. We've had individual conversations with legislators that are negotiating it, but other groups have been invited into the room during these negotiations, and we have not been.
Ken, do you know the cost differential between wind and solar versus fossil fuels and nuclear?
Wind and solar meaning between
Well,
like
a
megawatt hour or?
Let's see, I believe it's like 4 times more expensive.
I don't have that number off the top of my head, Terry, I don't know.
Forgive me, Dean Olson, for readers who are not totally in the weeds like you guys are, what will this largest rate hike take the form of for individual consumers, and will it differ in central Illinois and downstate compared to the Chicago area?
Yeah,
I'm
so.
sorry if this is too simplistic.
No. It's a great question, Dean, and I appreciate it. So.
And CWLP, which is municipally owned.
Correct. And so, looking at the MISO territory, for example, and I'm going to talk business first, the numbers that we've been given, so there are kind of 3 classifications: small commercial, large commercial, and industrial. They're projecting, again, just the bill, so we don't know some of the unknown costs of the ROE at the Commerce Commission or the market changes. The anticipated annual increase for small commercial, so your restaurant, 7.9%. They anticipate for large commercial, so that could be a grocery store, a big box, 10%. And industrial, they say it's between 10.5 and 12%. For residential customers in the central southern Illinois area, they're telling us it's probably about $7 a month. And again, that's just the known cost. Going to be a little bit different in the ComEd territory where the nuclear provision is part of that. It's not in the central southern Illinois area. But, they're looking, maybe $7 to $10 per month for a residential customer.
So is it like in a fee that's added onto your bill, and all the utilities have to agree to it, or?
Correct. The legislature passes, these laws go into effect, and then utilities, those costs get put on your customer bill, correct?
What would that, is that supposedly to help fund the assistance for the nuclear plants?
For a lot, so there's a lot of different things, and so talking to folks, so for example, changing the renewable portfolio rate cap, the estimate is about $230 million for that. Changing the base year calculation, I think we're told, is about $115 million. The nuclear part, maybe about $140 million. The Energy Transition Fund, which are kind of the social programs or the new programs, is about $215 million a year, and that's the part where they're doing the cost shift on the commercial industrial.
So what percentage overall will ratepayers be paying? I mean, and what can it range from?
Well,
business and industrial?
right, so again, you being in Springfield, looking at the MISO area, they're looking at small commercial, so, your hardware store, your restaurant, they're looking at about a 7.9% increase of just, annually. Large commercial, again, about 10%, and industrial between kind of 10 and 12%.
And we need to emphasize that. Those are annual we have to emphasize that. Those are annual cost increases that we've been able to learn about. Again, haven't been independently interrogated, but that's not just over the life of the bill. That's annual.
Whose estimates are those that you cited?
Those are talking to some of the utility companies that are trying to price the bill as well.
And how much
The
is
gentleman
modulated?
from Granite, or Alton Steel, I guess you're Alton Steel. Can you go to the microphone?
Sure.
Can you afford to keep operating with those cost increases, one? And two, can you operate a steel mill on wind and solar?
Those are really good questions. I'll take the first one first. We'd have to attempt to pass them on, and we compete against, for the most part, we're a small steel mill compared to folks like Nucor and U.S. Steel and those kind of guys. So we follow them in terms of pricing. But we'd be, one would assume, at a disadvantage versus where we are today. So it would increase our costs for sure.
And on the alternative energies, can we do that and still be a steel producer?
We are looking at a solar project, as a matter of fact, that's kind of waiting on this next bill to go through. And really, our challenge is that if we were able to do that, that would maybe be 5% of our usage. We're such a large user that it really takes a significant amount. And we also run in the nighttime hours because that's when the utility rates are lower. So therefore, it doesn't match up with us because, solar obviously is produced during the day.
And that's true of everyone, right? I mean, the fact is, it's just not reliable 24 hours a day power. And as you say, at most it's 5%. So ergo, you can't run without fossil fuels or nuclear.
Correct.
What are you hearing back from those in the working groups when you're raising these concerns? Those who may have the sentiments of, we need to get to 100% green energy by 2050.
Greg, I think it depends on who you talk to. I'm quite frankly shocked there's not been as much attention to cost and reliability. You've all been around for a long time, and when you're considering impacts of bills or tax increases, whatever it be, there's always that discussion. There has been little to no discussion about the cost or reliability, and that's part of the reason that we're here today. What is the cost? What is the impact on reliability? What is the impact on jobs? If you have a manufacturer like Jeff who has UAW members, and this is a substantial cost increase, and for whatever reason he has to eliminate union members, who are making great wages. So there's been no impact studies on that as well. And we know that manufacturers are the largest users of energy. We use 1/3 of all energy in the United States. And so, again, this will have a disproportionate impact on our sector. And again, those are the things, as Rob pointed out, those are the things that should be shown in transparent and open discussion so everybody knows. So hopefully we can coalesce around something. We may not win on every point, but we should at least have those open and honest discussions.
Mark, why the rush then? If it's such a detrimental thing, what is the rush to push this through no matter what the consequences?
It's a good question. That's why we're asking the governor and legislators to slow it down. I think, as Rick said, get it right the first time. You can't pass the trailer bill. You can't close Prairie State Energy Campus and then figure out 5 years down the road that, whoops, we made a mistake and we're going to turn it back on. You can't close a nuclear facility and come back 7 years later and say, oops, we made a mistake. We need to turn it back on. It doesn't work that way. So you have to make sure you get the policy right the first time. And I think, as Rob said, we got it right in 1997. We've saved tens of billions of dollars, and this is re-regulating the market, and they're doing it, quickly behind closed doors without full debate.
In terms of labor, what specifically would you like to see changed in order to come to some compromise?
And this is speaking specifically from the perspective of the Illinois Pipe Trades Association, but there has been very little assurances of any sort of orderly transition. I know we've, heard certain dates thrown out, 2035 for certain facilities, 2045 for certain facilities, but as we're digesting some of the proposals we're hearing in the working groups, we're hearing about carbon caps that may kick in as soon as 5 years after the bill is passed, like a process by the Illinois EPA to reduce overall statewide carbon emissions every 5 years that could, as far as my understanding goes, close plants as soon as in 5 years. So, how can you say, well, you have till 2045 when it could be 2026? I mean, that doesn't give a lot of assurances to our members. And, we know, like I said, the energy market is changing rapidly. Some plants are going to close whether there is legislation or not, and we're fully aware of that, and we just are trying to minimize the amount of damage and give us the amount, as much, leadway as possible so we can plan for this, so our members can find, alternate sources of income or make plans when they can expect to be able to retire, like can they afford their health insurance going forward? So I think that, the more, the more longer term we have in the bill, the more flexibility there is for plants to try to meet carbon reduction goals on their own that may be beyond, the typical wind and solar. Those are the things that we are, hope to see in the final product.
What's wrong with clean energy jobs?
There's nothing wrong with clean energy jobs. I mean, there are lots of opportunities for significant economic development in the state, but it is not a one-size-fits-all. Clean energy jobs are more one and done. Once they're built, there is very little maintenance. There's very little full-time workers. Compared to, say, a fossil fuel plant or a nuclear power plant where there is not just the construction, but the ongoing maintenance and turnarounds and shutdowns, and that, frankly, for us and the pipe fitters, that's the most concern for us. We have a number of members who work nearly strictly in the energy sector, and they depend on these maintenance shutdowns for a large source of their income every year. And if that disappears, they're not directly laid off by the company because they may be employed by a contractor, but they may go from averaging 2,000 working hours a year to 1,400 working hours a year. And over a course of a career, I mean, that is a significant loss of, quality of life.
So, a lot of people are going to argue, the planet can only wait so
Yeah.
long, and a lot of people say we've already waited too long. The goal of this legislation is to get to 100% clean energy by 2045. You don't like their roadmap? Do you have your own roadmap on how to get there?
Well,
Wait forever.
there's multiple proposals out there, and again, this is strictly speaking from the perspective of my organization, the Illinois Pipe Trades Association. I think the Illinois AFL-CIO has floated some well-thought-out proposals that would allow a little more flexibility, but would still, at the end of the day, help the state reach the goals that has been stated by the governor and other proponents of the legislation.
Can I ask again,
Last
the
question.
union representative? I just wonder to what extent has anyone really caught on? I think it's good you're doing this issue because a lot of people, I think it's still happening, and I think that's kind of the point. It's being rushed, and a lot of people around the state who are not in business are not up to speed on this and what it means to them. Would you say your union members are aware of the impact that this will have on them? One, not only their jobs, but just running their household, the cost. I don't think Rob Carr's members are going to suck up the extra costs. I think they're going to pass it along. So there's going to be a cost impact on every household by virtue of every single thing they buy because electricity impacts, obviously, everything. Are your members up to speed? Are they riled up? Or are they kind of, would you say, describe them, still maybe not as aware as you would like them to be?
Well, our members know, the significant sources of employment for them year after year, and, and many of those facilities are fossil fuel facilities. So, they are fully aware that many of these plants are at risk of closure, and so it is concerning. It's, when we go to union meetings, it's a topic of discussion all the time. There is fear about what's going to happen, what's the future going to look like, how are we going to, how are we going to survive this when some of these sources of employment for many decades, I mean generations, are at risk of closure as soon as 5 to 10 to 15 years.
Thank you.
One off topic for either Mark or Rob, or both. Unemployment insurance. $5 billion, $8 billion, where are we at? What's being done about it? We got all that federal dollars standing by.
Discussion yesterday, still being looked at. There's hopes by the Pritzker administration of obtaining additional federal relief. But we are looking, current projections are, we're still looking somewhere in the $8 billion range by the end of the fiscal year. You've already booked 3.1 from last year. You're looking at now it's been projected a little downward, about 4.7 for this year.
And then as far as timeline, it was brought up on the House floor that if it's not addressed by this fall, there could be interest.
Interest starts accruing after September 6th. We'll have roughly 14 million, I think, between September and end of December. But the next year, without any efforts to address it, you're looking at the state paying general revenue funds of 50 to 60 million to pay the interest.
And then, did you see the impact on employers if it's not addressed?
Well, it impacts on both employers and employees. I won't put our union friends on the spot, but there's only three ways to address this. You significantly increase taxes on employers, you significantly cut employment benefits, or you do some combination thereof, none of which are palatable. As you know, Greg, the largest problem we had before was $2.3 billion. We're not talking almost $8 billion. They can't afford it, we can't afford it, and the two together can't afford it.
Isn't the 4.7 billion at the end of this year a cumulative number, not
No,
added to?
no, it adds to,
Sure?
100%.
That's not what I'd said.
I'm sorry?
That's not what IDES said.
Well, then we'll have to go back because we've had we're both members of the Employment Security Advisory Board. That's been the clear message and understanding and been subjected to scrutiny throughout. It is cumulative.
If I can hear.
Yep.
And the other thing I would note, you've seen some recent studies that have come out lately on the fraud, where they're looking, I think, nationally, half of the benefits that were paid out were fraudulent potentially. So when you're talking about using ARPA dollars to come and help deal with that issue, it makes all the sense in the world. Why should employer taxes be funding benefits that went out fraudulently, potentially impacting workers who are going to see benefit cuts? So we've seen a number of other states. Ohio, I think, took $1.4 billion, helped their trust fund. I think Indiana took $400 million and did it. So a number of states have done this before. So thank you all. Have a good day.
Thanks, folks.
Thanks for watching, and if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to our channel. And while you're at it, please leave us a comment. Thank you for watching.